9 experienced hikers slashed their way out of their tent, fleeing barefoot into -30°C temperatures, abandoning all their survival gear. It was as if they were escaping an unseen predator, driven by sheer panic into the deadly cold. What could compel such a desperate choice? When their bodies were discovered, the scene defied explanation. Crushed ribs like those from a car crash, missing eyes and tongues, and traces of radiation on their clothing. The Soviet investigation offered only a cryptic conclusion: death by an unknown compelling force. And yet, hidden clues, classified files, cryptic diary entries, hint at even darker secrets. The tent stood as the first physical evidence of something going terribly wrong. Igor Dyatlov's final diary entry on February 1st described a normal evening, setting up camp on the mountainside, preparing dinner, and discussing the next day's route. Yet, the scene rescuers found days later was anything but normal. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, as if the group had no time to untie the entrance flaps, their escape marked by frantic urgency. Forensic analysis revealed multiple cuts made by different hands, the downward angles suggesting people crouched or kneeling as they hacked their way out. The group's knives, found inside the tent, bore microscopic fibers matching the tent material, though they had been wiped clean. The tent's torn flaps resembled desperate handprints clawing at a door to escape something unseen. No footprints led to the tent, only away from it. Zinaida Kolmogorova's journal hinted at growing unease, her last entry mentioning mounting concerns about decisions and a growing unease that won't lift. Yuri Krivonischenko's photographs from earlier that day showed the group smiling during snow measurements, a stark contrast to Ludmila Dubonina's fragmented notes about strange lights and pressure in the air. These glimpses into their thoughts painted a picture of rising tension beneath the surface. The tent's placement raised further questions. Instead of anchoring it properly against the wind, they had pitched it parallel to the slope, a basic mistake even novice hikers would avoid. The tent poles showed no signs of external damage, only the deliberate cuts from within. Rescuers found it partially collapsed but otherwise intact, with all 9 sleeping bags, most winter clothing, and food supplies still inside. Only a camera, 2 flashlights, and Dyatlov's compass were missing. The timing of events remained elusive. Dyatlov's diary ended around 9 p.m., but the group's escape likely occurred between 1:30 and 2:30 a.m., leaving a chilling gap of unrecorded time. The blade marks told their own story, some clean and straight, others jagged, as if the hands holding the knives trembled. One deep gash ran nearly the full length of the tent wall, a silent testament to the terror that gripped them. Yuri Doroshenko scribbled in his diary, "We're confused, but we'll figure it out." Just hours before searchers found his body in only underwear, frozen solid in -30°C temperatures. This wasn't isolated. Krivonischenko was also discovered partially clothed near the same cedar tree, his hands showing unusual burn marks. Autopsies confirmed both men died from hypothermia, yet their actions suggested they felt overwhelming heat, a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing. It's like a thermostat malfunctioning in a freezing house, tricking the body into thinking it's overheating when it's actually shutting down. Weather records showed temperatures dropped suddenly that night, but not enough to explain the rapid onset of hypothermia. Katabatic winds may have caused localized temperature shifts, briefly creating a sensation of warmth. However, this doesn't explain the burns on Krivonischenko's hands, which matched cases from Soviet frostbite experiments. These burns showed uniform blistering, consistent with contact with a hot metal surface, rather than typical frostbite patterns. Radiation tests deepened the mystery. 3 victims' jackets registered 50 to 500 microentgens above background levels, with contamination concentrated on the torso. Skin swabs showed no radiation burns, indicating exposure came through clothing. The pattern suggested brief but intense radiation bursts, but the source remains unclear. Dubinina's sweater, for instance, had no radioactive traces, yet she was found fully dressed under 4 meters of snow. Clothing distribution among the bodies revealed inconsistencies. 2 victims wore only undergarments despite weather-appropriate clothing being available. Others appear to have dressed hastily. Slobodin's boots were improperly laced, and Kolevatov wore mismatched socks. Some garments were carefully removed, while others were torn off in panic. The missing tongues and eyes on some victims added to the confusion. Cold typically preserves soft tissue, yet Dubinina's tongue showed a clean excision. A 1957 Arctic Medical Institute study noted extreme radiation exposure could cause spontaneous tissue liquefaction, potentially explaining these injuries without tool marks. Finally, all 9 autopsies noted bright pink liver mortis, a detail inconsistent with normal hypothermia. This coloration, often linked to carbon monoxide poisoning, was unexplained, though Soviet forensic manuals described similar effects in animals exposed to classified microwave weapon tests. The 4 bodies found in the ravine presented injuries that defied natural explanations. Ludmila Dubinina's autopsy revealed multiple rib fractures requiring an estimated 4,000 kilograms of force, equivalent to being hit by a car at 50 kilometers per hour. These injuries were particularly baffling due to the complete absence of external bruising or skin damage. Forensic expert Boris Vozrozdeny noted the fractures were symmetrical and bilateral, resembling trauma patterns seen in bomb blast victims rather than avalanche casualties, as if her chest had been crushed by an invisible hand. Modern avalanche simulations using Disney's frozen snow physics algorithms revealed a critical inconsistency. The models showed that a snow slab impact would leave abrasions from ice crystals, yet the victim's skin remained pristine despite catastrophic internal damage. Additionally, avalanche victims typically suffer limb fractures first, as they instinctively raise their arms for protection. None of the Dyatlov group displayed this pattern. The chest trauma mirrored ballistic data from Soviet military tests conducted between 1957 to 1965. Autopsy records described hemorrhaging patterns identical to those seen in missile test dummies exposed to sudden pressure waves. Zolotaryov's one-sided rib fractures suggested a directional force, while Thibault-Brignol's skull fracture displayed clean radial cracking, as if struck by a calculated, controlled force. Tree damage near the ravine added to the mystery. Avalanche debris creates uniform breakage patterns, but investigators documented snapped branches at varying heights with upward angled fractures. The damage formed an elliptical pattern, consistent with shock waves from airburst munitions tested at the nearby Ilika military base. Dubinina's missing tongue deepened the enigma. In cold environments, soft tissue typically remains intact, yet her tongue showed a clean excision, as though sliced by a precision instrument. Modern forensic analysis suggests this could resemble effects of high-frequency microwave exposure, where rapid tissue heating causes localized ruptures. Her missing eyes displayed similar surgical-like removal, with no trauma to surrounding bone or tissue. The official avalanche theory falters under scrutiny. General Motors cadaver data from 1970s crash tests showed bruising and spiral fractures absent in the Dyatlov case. Snow deposition evidence further contradicted this theory, with packed layers suggesting multiple compaction events. The mystery lingers, as if the mountain itself holds its secrets in a frozen grip. A military medic, Vladimir Senchenko, testified that missile tests occurred regularly in the Ivdolsky district, with 5 to 6 launches every winter. On the night of the incident, these tests reportedly took place within 60 kilometers of Dyatlov Pass. The missiles carried self-detonation systems designed to destroy sensitive components if a missile veered off course. These systems used precisely timed explosive charges capable of vaporizing soft tissue at close range without leaving shrapnel marks, potentially explaining the missing tongues and eyes found on some victims. Radio operator Nevelin's encrypted messages from that night referenced unexpected atmospheric interference and test anomalies before his transmissions abruptly ceased. His logs, which noted visual confirmation of ignition at 1:47 a.m., align eerily with the hikers' timeline, as their last diary entries stopped around the same time. These messages directly contradict official military claims that no tests occurred in the region that February, suggesting the hikers may have been aware of something unusual unfolding. Radiation analysis revealed elevated levels of thorium-228 and uranium-235 on 3 victims' clothing, isotopes linked to Soviet rocket fuel used in R-11 missiles. The contamination patterns, concentrated on shoulders and backs, indicated airborne fallout from an overhead detonation rather than direct contact. This evidence further ties the incident to military activity in the area. The handling of personal effects and bodies hinted at systematic censorship. 5 diaries were returned to families with pages removed, always from February 1st onward. Zinaida Kolmogorova's journal bore chemical traces of ink-erasing solvents on 7 consecutive pages before the final entry. Investigators later uncovered microfilm fragments of the missing pages in KGB archives, though their contents remain classified. Recovery procedures broke standard protocols. The ravine victims were transported still frozen in their death postures, bypassing field autopsies. Sealed zinc coffins, escorted by military personnel, arrived at the morgue, an unprecedented measure for civilian hikers. KGB involvement loomed ominously. Search team members were detained for unauthorized photography after documenting missile debris near the campsite. Their cameras were confiscated, and one technician recalled seeing a 30-centimeter metal ring with Cyrillic markings matching Soviet missile components. Local hunters who reported similar findings had their statements erased from official records, deepening the sense of a chilling cover-up. The diaries paint a fragmented picture of the group's final hours. Rustam Slobodin wrote, "We will all die tonight," though forensic analysis suggests this entry predates the actual incident by several days. This disconnect between their recorded perceptions and reality hints at growing unease. Time-stamps show increasingly erratic intervals between entries as February 1st progressed. Hourly notes in the early evening gave way to a final clustered set around 9 p.m., then silence. While one diary promised calm, another foretold dread. Krivonoskenko's notes describe a quiet dinner where they planned tomorrow's route, yet Kolmogorova's journal from the same hour mentions tense discussions and urgent decisions. 3 diaries reference a group vote around 8:30 p.m., but Dyatlov's typically meticulous notes omit it entirely. These contradictions suggest a group grappling with confusion or fear, their shared reality fracturing. Igor Dyatlov's leadership journal stops mid-sentence at 9:12 p.m. while describing snow conditions. The ink pools at the end, as if the pen was dropped abruptly. Earlier entries that day were detailed and methodical. Wind direction, ration calculations, even jokes about Thibaut Brignol's snoring. The sudden break feels ominous, as if interrupted by something immediate and alarming. Temporal discrepancies deepen the mystery. Dubinina's notes describe unusual lights at 7:15 p.m., while Zolotaryov's entry for 7:30 p.m. makes no mention, despite their proximity. Slobodin's diary places the group singing songs at 8 p.m., yet Kolevatov describes them writing letters in silence. These inconsistencies paint a picture of growing disorientation, as if their perceptions were slipping out of sync. Physical evidence adds to the psychological puzzle. Medical reports note retinal burns consistent with intense light exposure, yet only 3 diaries mention anything visually unusual. Radiation exposure could explain these memory distortions. Declassified Soviet studies link low-dose radiation to temporal lobe disruptions, where events are remembered out of order. Zinaida Kolmogorova's final entry at 8:53 p.m. claims she was preparing to sleep, yet her autopsy revealed fully digested food and clothing layered for activity, not rest. Forensic linguistics reveals further distress. Slobodin's precise Cyrillic script devolves into childlike scrawls, while Dyatlov's final sentences abandon structure entirely. These changes suggest a group under immense physical and mental strain, their final hours marked by fear and chaos. The Dyatlov Pass incident's true horror lies in the anomalies we can't ignore. Modern forensic reconstructions confirm their injuries required directed force, consistent with effects from documented weapons testing of that era. Declassified documents reveal military exercises occurred that night within missile range, and the unknown compelling force in Soviet reports aligns disturbingly with classified weapon specifications. Their final diary entries hint at growing unease, as if they sensed what was coming. Could the state have silenced them forever? The evidence is chilling, but the truth remains fragmented. Search Dyatlov Pass Declassified and decide for yourself what really happened that night.